Rick and Ronnie here for another podcast discussing the 5 elements of the BRRRR method to make your investment more profitable this year. And we are two team members, and we're going to be talking to Matt Tindera, and he's from Rent and Repair with us. And he'll tell us a little bit about the company and where he's located and what he can do to make your investment journey better.
Matt, go ahead and tell us a little bit about the background of yourself and your company.
Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Matt Tindera, and I am one of the co-founders of Rent and Repair with us. We're a full-service property management and maintenance company. A little bit of background on me. I got started in real estate back in 2015, and my co-founder, Justin Jaworski, got started in real estate back in 2002 or 3. So between us, we've got over 30 years of combined real estate experience in the buying and selling and property management space. Our company was founded in November of 2023, and our goal has always been to bridge the gap of management and the connection between owners, tenants, and the maintenance aspect of management. A lot of times companies will do one or the other, but not both. And so one of our strengths is bridging that gap and kind of effectively. So Rent and Repair, as a full service property management and maintenance company, we handle everything from leasing to the actual management of the property and maintenance as well. So anything from the start to the finish of the management journey, from buying all the way through leasing and maintaining, we can help our investors along that journey.
I have referred you a number of investors now to use your service. And the one thing we all have in common is they say that your expertise and your attention to detail is second to none, that you're really on top of everything. They're very responsive to when they have questions or whatever, with their properties. Yeah. And I think that's really important when you're an owner of a property and you have a lot of money at stake, is they have your teammates right next to you and right on task when they have good things done. So I'm going to ask you a very important question. Why should anybody hire a property manager over doing it yourself? You see all these things on TV, do it yourself. Why would you recommend having professional management as opposed to doing it yourself?
Their dollars, right? And so by paying somebody else, it seems like you're spending more money, when in reality, having a professional come in and assist with the management of your property actually earns you quite a bit more money. I can get into a little bit of how and why that works. And there's a lot of psychological and emotional toll that managing a property can take. And before I dive into all of that, I wanted to start with a story of how mismanaging can cost you, and then how going the other way and hiring management can amplify your success. Even though you're actually paying your property manager, you will end up making more money in the long run by having that person on your team and being your steward on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Our current investors, they came to us in July, self-managing from out of state. They had a home in one of the suburbs here in the Detroit area, and they moved into this home expecting it to be their long-term home, and they ended up getting a job opportunity out of state. So they said, hey, you know what? We've got this beautiful home. Let's see if we can rent it out. And so that's what they did. They found a tenant, they moved them in, and somewhere along the way, that tenant started to fall behind on their rent. And about May of last year, this tenant started making excuses about why they're late on rent. Over and over, they'd come up with an excuse or come up with some kind of story. The owners would give them a little more leeway, and that process continued on until they reached out to us in July. We explained our process. Hey, this tenant is behind. Let's file a 7-day notice. Let's begin the eviction process. Even if you don't actually evict, we can potentially create a good tenant here by initiating this process, right? It gives them that urgency that they need to pay. Otherwise, there are consequences. We laid out what our attorney fees are, all of those things. And in the end, these owners decided to utilize what they called a free option of legal assistance through their employment. They had a legal hotline that they could help and some attorneys assisting them. Lo and behold, we're a couple weeks down the road from when they initially contacted us in July and just barely filed the 7-day notice to get the process going. Fast forward, it is now October before we finally have a judgment for the tenants to be out within 30 days. November's approaching. The tenant is not going to be out by that date. And so these owners come to us again, approach us again to bring us on an official capacity, instilling hard deadlines so that they know what the consequences are if they don't meet those deadlines. We wanted to inform them of the benefits of being out before a court officer executes an eviction, all of those things. And in the end, we were successful in getting her out of there just about a week and a half after her judgment date. We didn't pay anything for cash for keys. And through all of this, those owners were so beat up and defeated. They weren't thinking clearly about their money and all the things that they were spending. And at that point, they were questioning us once we had possession on simple things like service call fees to replace a toilet valve that was leaking, and just didn't want to spend a single dollar more because they had lost so much. This tenant, they were over $3,000 a month. So if we're going to do the quick math, fell behind in May, June, July, that's 3 months they're not collecting any rent. That's nearly $10,000 that they were out by that point. That tenant didn't get out of that house until mid-November, right? Mm-hmm. So at that point, we're nearing $20,000 that they're out. Then at that point, we had turnover, we had some additional expenses there. And all of this, not to mention the money that we saved them by avoiding that court officer coming out and charging them several $1,000s to complete that eviction, right? The psychological aspect of negotiating with that tenant and getting them out of there. When all was said and done, these owners, by not following simple property management processes, were out over $20,000 plus a little bit extra during the transition period before we were able to place a new tenant on their behalf.
Wow.
So
did you have to do some repairs to get it rentable again?
Yep. And so in the meantime, the whole unit had to be repainted. The tenant had hung a bunch of photos with nails. They damaged some walls. So on top of the lost collections, they also lost out due to some damages, and a security deposit of 1.5 months rent does not quite cover all of that. Had they been with a professional management company from the start and listened to some outside counsel, they would have filed for a 7-day notice within a week of that first payment being late. They wouldn't have had to file for the eviction right away, but that could have been potentially enough to cause that tenant to rethink their priorities and know that an eviction could be coming and start to pay.
Right. So you mentioned the emotional toll that took on your investor. And when they're trying to renter, their heartstrings are full. They want to believe that they're going to turn this around. And it just becomes hard because nobody wants to be a jerk, right? Everybody wants to be a good landlord.
Right.
When they hire you, it totally takes them out of that mix. They don't have to say, oh, I just want to help these guys or whatever. Because it's hard to believe the stories are not. So.
Correct. And we understand stories. We understand life in general. Times are hard. Anybody can get into a bad spot in any moment, but unfortunately, this is a business, right? You are renting from somebody. And as an investor, as an owner, this is your business. Right. You can either choose to follow certain processes and do things in a timely fashion and the right way, or you could potentially be out thousands, tens of thousands of dollars very quickly.
Yeah. So I've been there.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been there. And Rick and I always say, this is not personal, it's business. Except this guy who's doing the business, you're trying to just build his.
So if I heard you correctly, you had lost rent during a time period. You had damages that were done to the property that had to get repaired before it could be re-rented. And then you brought up another point that very few investors know about, is that when you go to actually evict somebody and they don't get out during the court prescribed time, it gives you the ability to hire the court officers to come out and actually remove their personal belongings, typically into a dumpster or 2 dumpsters. I had one for 2 dumpsters one time. And this was years ago. It cost me $2,000. And so today it's got to be like double that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had one recent court officer come out whose fee was a minimum of $2,800. That's without rekeying fees. That's a very quick way to lose that much more money, where up front, if you have a manager advising you along the way, there's additional strategies in addition to the eviction process, which is absolutely necessary. You have to file your court dates and follow the law 100%. But there's other things you can do, for example, cash for keys or things like that, where it can be a mutually beneficial situation to the owner and to the tenant. They feel like they've won home. The owner is getting their asset back and stopping any further losses. And us as the managers, we've got a win-win now, because we've got the asset on behalf of the owner. The tenant is out, and we can now place a new tenant and turn that pipeline back on for that owner.
So when you're looking for new tenants, you probably have a process that you go through, which I believe could include a background check, right?
Absolutely. Every manager is going to have a potentially slightly different process, but we have minimum internal criteria that we set and things that we review. We do background screenings, including eviction history, income statements, bank statements, as well as pay stubs. And then we make sure that those pay stubs and those bank statements match up, right? So if somebody shows you that they've got this pay stub, but that money never hits that bank account, that creates questions, right? And so that could potentially be a red flag. We have our own internal criteria that we set. And then we have a panel in our company. We all have to sign off on a tenant prior to approving that person for move-in. Because if one person says something smells funny and backs it up, then we're all in agreement, and multiple eyes help kind of weed out some of those potential concern areas that tenants have.
A long-time investors will know what I'm talking about next is that there's a certain category of tenants, I call them professional tenants. And
Absolutely.
they may have a history of being evicted. So they know when they're looking for a new victim that if it's a professional management company, as soon as the call is answered by you guys, they go click, they hang up, and they keep calling until they find another victim that doesn't understand how the system works. And then the process begins again and again and again with these people.
Absolutely. And even with some of these professional tenants, I mentioned the eviction process. One thing that isn't widely known is that just because an owner or a management company files an eviction on a tenant doesn't mean that they have an eviction on their record, right? So you go through a court process, and there could be a consent judgment between the owner or management company and the tenant that they will either vacate or pay a certain amount, and they will not have that eviction on their record.
Yeah.
Calling previous landlords and previous owners on an application history, that is very important in a lot of cases to weed out potential bad tenants.
So sometimes there's a situation too, when you fail to do a background check, they could actually be operating a business that you wouldn't want out of the house.
Absolutely.
Through a criminal background check, you're able to perhaps pick up different things. I had a relative tell me a really terrible story. He had a very expensive home in California that he had left to go to a condo. And he says, you know what? I think the market's going to really go up here in California, which was true. So he wanted to rent it out. When the rent stopped coming in and he was able to regain possession of property, guess what he found inside his house? A meth laboratory. Because they were cooking the chemicals in the house, it totally destroyed the whole interior of the home. The home had to be virtually gutted down to the studs and then rebuilt. Having a professional property manager totally pays. You can never put as much money in your pocket doing it yourself. Even the position that you're in, when you're a property owner and you're trying to rent it out and they know that you're the owner, it's different than when you're working with third-party person, because they realize a third-party person isn't going to for the music, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
then it's different strategy.
Go ahead.
The tenant realizes that they can't use the strategy of playing on their heart to be able to stay in there for many, many more months.
Absolutely. And so, we've touched on a lot of the kind of downfalls that come with managing a property yourself. And it doesn't always have to be all bad, right? A professional manager can help steward your property in a way where good tenants can be created by making their living situation a priority, right? When they understand that if that rent isn't coming in on time or within the month that it's due, by being proactive and sending notices and then understanding that filing an eviction case is sometimes a necessary piece, it can go one of two ways, right? That tenant will understand, hey, this person is serious. And from there, they will never make a mistake again with you, or you get them out of there and you get possession of your property that much quicker and you can start fresh, right? So it's important to have those processes and systems in place to maximize the cash flow coming in or stop the bleeding if things aren't going the way that they need to be. And that relates back to one of the other things that we talked about is that psychological or emotional aspect, right? That bringing that home with you every day and talking about it at the dinner table. Self-managing, you're handling those phone calls with the tenant. You're trying to chase those dollars, right? You're chasing rent every month. And, your partner is asking you, hey, what's going on? It looks like we're spending money on this house that we thought was going to be making us money. And it creates strife, right? And so by outsourcing some of that, you get that high level look. And if you want more information, you can always schedule a call with your manager and get that additional detail. But all of that stress is handed off to somebody who can handle it in a professional and efficient manner, right? And so that's probably the biggest thing about property management from a psychological standpoint is just knowing that you have a partner there looking out for your interests and making sure that cash flow continues to come in.
Tell us about your business partner, what he does.
Yep. So Justin, my business partner, he heads up the maintenance and construction side of our business. And that's actually the things that I was going to get into next in terms of the psychological, emotional, and just time aspect of management. If you're self-managing and a pipe freezes and bursts in a basement in the middle of winter at 2 a.m. and you're getting that phone call, who has to handle that? You as the investor or owner, if you are self-managing. Now you may have a maintenance person that you've got some kind of agreement with that sends out, but you're still getting that phone call. With a management company and a maintenance company like ours, we handle all of that start to finish, and we can relieve you of that 2 a.m., that 3 a.m. phone call that is, waking you up and keeping you up the rest of the night while you have your day job, while you have your kids, while you have anything else going on in the world. This asset that you have that's supposed to be generating you money is now no longer creating stress in your life because you've got somebody handling those kinds of issues on your behalf.
I thought that was a very valuable power to have because from the time that the tenant complains to the time that the tenant gets satisfied, that time period is really important. And many times the landlord let it lingers, like a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and maybe they turned off the water supply to that part of the house, but they're not happy with you because they can't,
if they know how to do it,
take a shower right now, or they can't cook in their house, or even worse, they can't use their toilet. So the result is you have your ownership and your tenant you're having where they're thinking, where are we going to go at the end of this lease, right?
Exactly.
And so what your job as landlord is to be able to keep them in this place longer. You probably have cases where the people are really satisfied with your service and they stay in an extra year or two or more because they liked how well the service was, right?
Exactly. And that's, turnover is a profit killer, right? Every time you have a vacancy, you're losing a minimum of 1 month's rent in most cases, right? Sometimes 2 months, the market might be changing. There might be renovations that you have from tenant damage or just natural wear and tear of a home. And so the longer you keep that tenant, now, another benefit of using a property manager from that aspect is we do market analyses constantly. And so when it comes time to do a renewal, we can be your advocate on any kind of potential rent increase, whether you should stay at the same rate. Now we know everything gets more expensive every single year, right? Your taxes go up. And so naturally the inclination is to bump up that rent as much as possible. And so one of the drawbacks to trying to maximize every single dollar from that standpoint is you could potentially be creating a turnover situation where that tenant, let's say they're a great paying tenant, they haven't paid a day late, and you try and bump their rent by $200, $300, something like that, because you think that that's where the market is going. they may not be able to afford that and they may choose to leave. Now, increased amount from a tenant that's out there. By a property manager doing those market analyses prior to lease expiration, we can be your advocate and say, hey, we think that there's a little bit more room to grow here. We could bump their rent by X amount, by some modest amount that keeps the owner happy. The tenant can absorb that and they're still generating that. The owner is still generating that profit in the meantime.
One last thing I wanted to talk to you about pertaining to your superpowers. Many of the communities have adopted a rental certification where you have to have the property inspected by as many as 8 different inspectors from the city before they'll grant you a rental certification. Is that something that's in your wheelhouse?
So we can handle the registration process with the municipality. We can handle covering the inspection. We can handle meeting with the So we handle everything from registering the rental with the municipality. We can work with inspectors to get access to the property and actually complete the inspections. Once we have that punch list of whatever violations the inspector provides, we can quote and complete all of that work on your behalf and see it all the way through to actually having that certification completed. Many municipalities, it's 1 year, some are 2, some are 3, it just depends. But your property manager should be educating you on those processes, the costs involved, and how to navigate them.
Well, we want to thank you, Matt, for coming on board. I understand we're right in the middle of your absolutely where you're slammed right now, but you just covered is really going to help out a number of people. And definitely, when they're thinking about what they're going to do with the landlordship, now they're going to see that there's just enough obstacles in it that it's better to let the professionals handle it. So, Matt, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I want to thank your partner, because you two guys really helped us out a lot. And Ronnie, did you have anything else?
Well, just let everybody know if you want to get in touch with Matt, you can go to rentandrepairwithus.com and you can get in touch with Matt Sendera. Also, if you want to know more about the 5 elements of the essential elements of the BRRRR method to do your investment, go to BRRRR.com and take a look at the website. You can make an appointment right online with Rick to help you figure out if the property you're looking at is a good prospect for your next investment purchase.
Well, thank you, everybody. And have a great week.
Awesome.
Thank you, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, everyone. It's Rick and Ronnie here again with another podcast explaining the 5 essential elements of the BRRRR method to make your investment journey more successful. And of course, the greatest thing to do is build your team. Today, we have Rick, who is one of the co-founders of the company that is using the method.